Welcome to Port 25. I am Kishi, the Senior Program Manager for Microsoft's Open Source Lab. Today, we're here with Arne Josefsberg. Arne is the General Manager for Infrastructure Services in MSN Operations. Arne, welcome to Port 25.
Thank you, Kishi.
We'd like to basically start with a general discussion and just ask you to introduce who you are, your role as part of the MSN Operations leadership.
Yep. Arne Josefsberg, I'm General Manager for Infrastructure, essentially online infrastructure for the company. We're now part of Windows Live Operations. We used to be called MSN Operations, but now it's sort of supporting Windows Live and essentially all the online initiatives across the company. Our job is to provide the infrastructure foundation to support sort of the company's investments into services.
Fantastic. Could you tell our audience basically a little bit more background into how long have you been with MSN/Windows Live Services, your extensive background in bringing MSN up, live as a service, and a little bit more context around what IS is all about?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a long-term veteran of the company, as you know. I've been in this role for about 4 years in MSN Windows Live, but I have a long-term experience in online services, actually dating back to the very first launch of MSN back in 1994.
Absolutely, I remember.
So, yeah, I've been around online business longer than most people in the industry.
Fantastic. Would you like to share with our viewers the services that are provided by the MSN Infrastructure Services, and particularly their impact to the online services business?
Absolutely. The company's strategy around online services is very broad. As you know, it goes all the way from consumer sites like Messenger and Hotmail to small medium business, all the way up to enterprise things like Office Live and web collaboration, like Office Live Meeting, etc. So our strategy in sort of supporting a wide variety of services is to combine and form a common online underpinning, and that's the infrastructure that I manage. So think of it as the foundation from physical data centers, our local area networks, our wide area networks, our global network infrastructure, and also shared services such as DNS and Active Directory and content replication, essentially anything I would consider sort of foundational at the infrastructure level. Our strategy has been to combine and integrate that across the company in one organization to drive economies of scale and a seamlessness across services.
Fantastic. As the online business, obviously, the extent of the growth and proliferation that has occurred, especially over the past decade, has been enormous. And I know you've been a significant part of this growth and being a witness to the phenomena. At a general level, what do you see as some of the challenges in the arena as we take the next steps or as we go forward? What are some of your general impressions that you have?
There are actually a number of challenges. One of the biggest challenges for my organization lately is that as a company we're moving heavily into services, and from an infrastructure perspective we've seen starting about 2 years ago we've entered a phase of hypergrowth. Very, very rapid expansion of any way you measure it, number of servers we manage, number of data centers, size of data centers, the amount of network traffic is absolutely skyrocketing. And to manage hypergrowth in infrastructure where frankly there's a lot of the company's operating costs sit in infrastructure, doing that in a smart, controlled way while you're doubling or more than doubling the size of your footprint every year is extremely challenging. And our philosophy about running online infrastructure is to do it through smart innovations in automation, streamlining processes, etc., instead of throwing hundreds and hundreds of people at it. So our challenge is to kind of drive that innovation into the network in order to scale.
Fantastic. Very cool. Now, I guess one of the questions that we get asked from the standpoint of an IT professional is how does MSN manage its or optimize its infrastructure? Not in specific terms, but more importantly, what does MSN or Windows Live do good? What are they good at?
We're good at a number of things. Obviously, Microsoft's core we're a software company, and although I run sort of physical and logical infrastructure, a lot of that isn't software. We come to realize that, in fact, the key to scaling out data center operations and network operations to a large extent lies in smart software. So the key for us is to automate process. There are a couple of pillars actually. One is around standardization. Even though we run a multitude of, in fact, very different services. Something like Hotmail that stores customer state is very different than sort of more transactional systems like Messenger or things like Office Live. So we have a huge variety of things running on the network, and the challenge is really finding the commonality. So driving standards in servers, in network architecture, and finding commonalities that can scale against very, very different types of transactions, very, very different types of applications is really where we spend a lot of our time. It's one thing to scale out a very homogeneous application layer. You can do that, relatively easily because everything looks the same. But in terms of driving standards across a pretty heterogeneous application environment, that's very challenging. That's where we spend a lot of time, and so drive server standards, network standards, automation standards. That's really the key for us in terms of where we spend our mind share and where we invest.
Fantastic. Now, I know that from a metrics and measurability standpoint, you're responsible for overseeing a fairly large infrastructure, in fact probably one of the largest in the industry, that is geographically dispersed across different continents, multiple data centers that are spread all across the world. So the question that that we get put by some of our viewers and some of our colleagues are that what makes us successful internationally, meaning how do we what are some of the I won't say challenges, but how do we manage such a diverse and large infrastructure that is spread across internationally, and what are some of the lessons that we learn as we really become a global or are a successful global services management company?
Yeah. Well, one of our key goals is even though say running a data center in, for instance, Japan, there are very different realities in Japan versus the U.S. in terms of telecom infrastructure, ISP infrastructure, cost structures can be very different. But our goal has clearly been to have the exact look and feel of our infrastructure from an application perspective, whether you're in Europe, Asia, or in the U.S. So achieving from an application perspective down, achieving that same look and feel and the same experience has been very, very key to us. Now, in terms of measuring the services, that's super important, and measuring at different level is important. So measuring availability and performance within data centers where we can control all the parameters, but also measuring all the way out to the client experience, and that's where realities are very different with how the internet is developed in some of the developing countries versus U.S. and measuring that all the way out to the client and figuring out ways to accelerate user performance in less developed regions of the world is kind of where we spend a lot of our time from a performance management perspective.
Fantastic. This is all very good. I guess my last and the foremost question, knowing you having worked for you the past 3 years or so, and then looking at your persona and your background, we'd love for you to pass some operations wisdom to our viewers and share with us either experience or experiences that we can all benefit from, and especially to our IT pro professionals who are out there trying to manage heterogeneous environments. What is the word of wisdom or advice that you would give to these IT professionals?
Yeah, first of all, it all starts with having great people. That's number one for me. It's actually one of the core philosophies of Microsoft. I shouldn't let great people like you leave the group, for instance. And then, I think what's interesting in terms of running IT environments or running online operations environments like the one I do is kind of to allow people to have creativity, to allow people to attack hard problems. It's very easy for people to get into sort of the day-to-day operations, and you kind of it's easy to not see how things can be improved when you do the same job day in and day out. So really challenging the organization about looking at the problem differently, allowing people to challenge status quo, to come up with great ideas about how to improve the services, whether it's new innovative ways to measure customer experience or new ways to automate and make the online environment more effective. I think it's always about moving up one level, one notch every week, every month, challenging status quo, think creatively about the problem space, having great people, and measure the environment at every layer of the stack.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much for taking the time to do this, Arne. And on behalf of Port 25, we want to thank you for tuning in, and appreciate it. Thanks.